Hello everyone, I welcome you all to my YouTube channel Current Ka Affairs. Here I discuss few articles from The Hindu and Indian Express and some related editorials. And today's topic of discussion will be on anti-TB drug. Secondly, we'll discuss about the criminal defamation case. And third, we'll discuss about suicide amongst farmers in Bheri district. So let's get started. The first news is related to anti-tuberculosis drug. Today we use this drug bedaquiline as a treatment for multi-drug resistant TB. Okay, and it is like widely used in India. And जो इसके sole manufacturer हैं वो है Johnson and Johnson, which is a US based company. एंड उसकी एक सब्सिडरी है जो कि इंडिया में है, दैट इज कॉल्ड जेसन. ठीक है, और दे आर द सोल मैन्युफैक्चरर ऑफ इट, एंड बिकॉज दे हैव मोनोपोली उनके टैबलेट्स भी काफ़ी एक्सपेंसिव होते हैं. टुडे इट इज़ प्राइस्ड एट $400 फॉर 6 month ट्रीटमेंट कोर्स. ठीक है, तो इट्स क्वाइट एक्सपेंसिव एंड अनरीचेबल फॉर पुअर पीपल. सो अभी भी they have applied to extend their patent beyond July 2023, but जो Indian Patent Office है, they have strictly rejected it. And this is very significant moment because अब जो generic producers हैं like Lupin and Miclots, they will be able to manufacture this drug, and this will bring down the cost and people will have wider access to it. So what are these generic drugs? So it is a medication that is equivalent to brand name drug and yield same therapeutic effect. So basically ये वैसे ही काम करता है जैसे वो branded medicines काम करते हैं. They have same dosing and they have same strength, safety and quality to it, and they also undergo same regulatory standards. बट बिकॉज कंपनी ने उसके डेवलपमेंट में उसके रिसर्च पे खर्च किया था, सो ऑब्वियसली दे वांट देयर रिटर्न्स बैक, एंड दैट इज व्हाई दे हैव दिस पेटेंट राइट ओवर इट, दैट कोई भी इनके अलावा इसे मैन्युफैक्चर नहीं करेगा, विच जनरली लास्ट फॉर 20 years. बट हेयर कम्स एवरग्रीनिंग ऑफ पेटेंट, जिसमें क्या करती है सारी जो कंपनीज, वो पेटेंट को बढ़ाने के लिए दे स्टार्ट changing in its composition. Okay, or they start reformulating a drug and then they market it as a new product, and by all this they try to extend their patent. But we this time we took a stand and we rejected it, so that this manufacturing of generic drugs can be done in India, because these are less expensive. जो ये जेनरिक मेडिसिन है वो 80 to 85% कम दाम पे मिलते हैं, जिसकी वजह से वो अफोर्डेबल हो जाते हैं लोगों के लिए. देन अवेलेबिलिटी, बिकॉज देयर विल बी अ मल्टीपल मैन्युफैक्चरर, सो इसकी जो अवेलेबिलिटी है मार्केट में वो भी बढ़ेगी. then more choice, people will have more choice to between this generic medicine और जो ये branded होते हैं, तो they can go for it based on their cost, their personal preference. then काफ़ी competition रहेगा, multiple drug manufacturer रहेंगे, तो जिससे कि वो जो prices है वो थोड़ा कम रहेगा, and this will improve access to healthcare. Now, tuberculosis is a bacterial disease. It is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and it affects lungs and other organ as well, like brain or spine. And it is a contagious disease transmitted through air. And here are some of the symptoms like cough with sputum, sometimes blood. Then you'll get chest pain, weaknesses, fever, loss of appetite. So these are some of the symptoms, and it is completely treatable and curable. And it has a 6 month drug regime where these drugs will be given in a very systematic way, and it has to be strictly followed. Otherwise, there is a tendency that this bacteria might develop resistant to it, and once it develop resistant, we get multi drug resistant tuberculosis. and this is more serious, the treatment becomes more difficult and risk of death also increases. But why do we develop resistance to these drugs? जो first inadequate diagnosis, और you can say late diagnosis, उनको पता ही बहुत late चलता है, या फिर they they cannot say कि ये normal TB है और it has come to a stage of MDR TB. Then second is incorrect or incomplete treatment. So most of this patient doesn't complete their 6 month का जो regime है, they do not complete it. No, and it is थोड़ा expensive भी होता है, so they are not able to afford it. Okay, then transmission of drug resistant strain, as you know that it is communicable. Okay, so this जो drug resistant TB है, they can be transmitted from one person to another. And जो HIV के जो patient है, they already have low immune system, and they are likely to develop drug resistant TB. So the next article is related to criminal defamation. So it was in 2019 when Mr. Gandhi was conducting an election rally in Karnataka. There he made some remark which kind of offended a community, and one of the MP from BJP filed an FIR against him under section 499 and 500 that deals with criminal defamation. And and now after lot of proceedings, Mr. Gandhi has been sentenced to jail for 2 year term in a criminal defamation case. So what is defamation? So it is an intentional act. Okay, it is an intentional act of a person, oral or written, that harm the reputation of an individual or an entity. So इसमें याद रखना है that it is an intentional act of a person, then it can be oral or written. So oral is also called slander or written libel, and that harms the reputation of an individual as well as any organizations. ठीक है? And in India, we have defamation both as civil offense and as criminal act. And civil offense is dealt under law of tort, where it is considered as a civil wrong, and there is a possibility of correction, and the victim will get compensation also. But in criminal act, which is under section 499 and 500, it deals defamation as a criminal act, and here the culprit might get 2 year jail term with or without fine. So this case of defamation has been in news, and there is an allegation that it is used to stifle the voice of activist or journalist or anybody who says anything against the government. So it's kind of a threat to freedom of speech and expression. So now we'll discuss some of the arguments in favor of letting go of criminal defamation and some arguments against it. So first is threat to freedom of speech. So when you criminalize defamation, you send a chilling effect on freedom of speech. इस क्योंकि बहुत सारे जो जर्नलिस्ट है they will hesitate to speak the truth because they'll fear that they will be prosecuted. Also, this will deter public debate or government accountability. Also during Me Too movement, when many women came out and spoke about their sexual harassment at workplace, so जिस पे उन्होंने ये इल्ज़ाम लगाया था, they imposed criminal defamation cases. But in MJ Akbar versus Priya Ramani, Supreme Court acquitted Priya Ramani and kind of protected and preserved the space for women who have found their voice in recent times. So, so you can see how significant this freedom of speech is. Now, second is existence of civil remedy. So many contested that there is already existence of civil remedy for these cases where damages can be adequately addressed. Okay, और जो compensation है that can be given without the need for any criminal sanction. Then the proportionality of offense. It means that imprisonment is a severe punishment. Okay, and the damage that is done by a defamation may not be equal to the damage that an imprisonment can do. Okay, because इसके काफी legal consequences भी है. Then international standards. So many developed countries and democratic countries have given more preference to freedom of speech and kind of said to abolish this criminal defamation. The next argument is Article 19 says about reasonable restrictions, not arbitrary restriction. Okay, so the restriction has to be reasonable. Sometimes just you get offended and then you file a defamation case and then you say then you say freedom of speech is not absolute. So this is not a very valid argument. Then the right to reputation versus freedom of speech. Next is right to reputation versus right to freedom of speech. So they argue that in where it is written that freedom of speech is less valuable than right to reputation. It is right to reputation that is derived, but freedom of speech and expression is explicitly given in constitution. So you need to find a balance. You cannot put reputation ever freedom of speech. Here are some of the arguments that is against decriminalizing defamation. So first is freedom of speech is not absolute. There are certain reasonable restrictions, and defamation is one of the condition there. Uh, then second is like Subramaniam Swamy versus Union of India has said that right to live with dignity is a fundamental right under Article 21, and defamation as defamation kind of threaten this dignity. Prevent public disorder. So, because of some defamatory statement, some community might get offended, and this leads to violence on a large scale. So, at that time, this might come as a legal mechanism to prosecute those people who made such defamatory statement and kind of bring some relief to those who were hurt. And then it is also consistent with law that deals with hate speech. And one of the major ramification of this is that under Section 8, Clause 3 of Representation of People's Act, it mandates that if an MP is sentenced to imprisonment of not less than 2 years, then he will be disqualified to contest election. So now, if his appeal is rejected, then he will be disqualified. So see the ramification of it. Therefore, it can be heavily misused by the party at power to stifle the voice of opposition. The next article is related to suicide among farmers, and according to National Crime Report Bureau, farming sector account for 6.6% of total suicide, and this number is 10,881. Like 10,881 farmers committed suicide. Not just farmer, so half of it are farmers and the cultivators, and the second half is like 5,563 were agricultural laborer also. These farmers, they have their own land and they are committing suicide. They work on somebody else's land. But what are the problems they face that they are committing suicide? That we have to look. Then in India, most of these cases occurs in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and then Andhra Pradesh. And among these three, Maharashtra is the worst affected, and there is a district by name Beed. It is in Marathwada region, and it is often termed as suicide capital of the state. But why is it so that these Maharashtra, Karnataka, these regions are most affected? एक तो ये है that this Marathwada region comes under rain shadow area, and these rain shadow areas are the one where the rainfall is very less. Like in beet, it has been a drought prone area, and drought is persistent there for like 10 years now. So it is one of the most important reason. Then second is जो काफी सारे जो land holdings है in farmers की, that is very small and marginal. So it means they have less than a hectare of land on it. So इसकी कितनी ही productivity होगी. So this is another reason. Second is informal borrowing, because they do not have a document. They cannot go to bank for a loan. एंड इन सच सिचुएशन वो क्या करते हैं, जो लोकल लैंडलॉर्ड्स होते हैं, साहूकार होते हैं, उनसे वो पैसे मांगते हैं, एंड ऑन विच दे चार्ज hefty interest like 30 to 40% more than what bank will charge them. So this is another problem. Then there is a high dependence on sugarcane cultivation there. So there was a time when sugarcane cultivation was profitable for farmers, but down the line now it is not that profitable because it is a water sucking plant. And आप अभी पढ़े that इस ऐसे एरिया में growing crop which is this much water intensive will not be profitable. Then काफी सारे जो workers हैं, these agriculture laborers, they work in sugarcane farm, एंड क्योंकि इतना ज़्यादा प्रोडक्शन हो जाता है तो उनका मार्केट में प्राइस भी कम हो जाएगा, तो दे वोंट बी एबल टू पे बैक द लोन दैट दे हैव टेकन फ्रॉम दिस, जो इसका प्राइसेस कम हो गए हैं उससे. Then agriculture is the main occupation for them. They do not have any other form, other alternatives of livelihood. They are mostly dependent on it. पूरा पैसा इसी पे लगाया है. So if something happens, अगर crop fail होता है, तो they have nothing. Then here are some of the facts which can be useful for you. So 86% of the total land holdings in India is less than 2 hectares. Okay, and 68.5% is less than a hectare, 1 hectare. This is small and marginal farmers, इन्हीं को बोलते हैं. And average size of holding is 1.08 hectares, and average outstanding loan per agriculture household is 74,000. The next issue this article discusses is suicide by female farmers, which often go unreported and unnoticed. So, the number of female farmers and the cultivators are around 211, and women agricultural laborers is 442. So, this is also a significant number, but we hardly talk about it. So why it is that it is not reported? So पहला reason ये है that often they are not recognized as land owners. Okay, बहुत ही कम है that they are the one who is owning that land. ठीक है. Then second is उनके death को mostly report करते हैं as a domestic violence or some other personal issues. उस सब के heading के अंदर they are being reported but not as something like a suicide committed because of distress in farming sector. Now, these are some of the steps that can be taken to prevent suicide among farmers, and these points are very self-explanatory. So you can see it from here, and you add some other. Also, whenever you write some points, find out what are the steps government has taken in this regard. Okay, so that's all for today. I'll see you tomorrow.